Minister,
You speak in Spanish.
do you speak Spanish?
No, I wish I could speak Spanish because I miss so much.
Yeah.
Right, English.
Next time.
The next time.
Well, thank you very much for being here, Mr. Minister. We are very glad to receive you here in the Sports Center, a very important Mexican Jewish institution. And the first question I have to ask you, because many people here, they don't know what exactly the Minister of the Diaspora do. So, what is exactly your job as Minister of the Diaspora?
It's a nice way to ask what I'm doing here in town. But I can tell you that most of the Israelis also don't know what it is from diaspora. So I'm in a good position. I'm in charge of the relationship between the diaspora, the Jewish diaspora, which makes like 8 million people, and the state of Israel, where there are a little bit over 7 million. So you still belong. My community is larger than the Jewish community in the country. And I'm supposed to look for projects, initiatives, partnerships that will strengthen the relationship on both ends, in the diaspora on the one hand, and in Israel on the other hand. On both ends, we should work very hard. But let me tell you, I feel after a short visit to Mexico City that I don't have to convince you about Israel, but I have to convince Israelis about the importance and the relevance of the diaspora to Israel. Many of them do not get it, and I don't blame them. That's not part of their daily schedule or daily life. We have full life in Israel, we have so many concerns on our minds that sometimes it's hard to tell them what it was. Something is cooking in Cancun. They said, okay, Cancun is far away, couldn't care less. And I'm the one who's supposed to carry the message that the Jewish people is one, and we are united, and we care for the same things, and we have a common destiny. It's not a simple matter.
But it's an important change in Israel, because for Zionism it's very important, the role of the diaspora. And what you are saying is that in Israel they are losing this relationship with the diaspora, or they don't give a lot of attention to what's happening with the Jewish communities around the world.
There is a generational change here on both ends. I'm sure that the original generation of Mexican Jews had different perception of Israel in comparison with you or with comparison with the young generation. And we should work very hard not to lose the young generation, because they are, first of all, the commitment is a little bit weaker. The miracle of having a Jewish state is over. Looking at Herzl over there, okay? So I'm asking myself, what is the next, we have no room on the wall, but what's the next chapter, okay? That should be, by the way, IDCI is too small. I think you have to expand it a little bit, Marcus. It's really, I see no sports, no soccer games here, no. So next time I come, make it bigger, okay? That's but I'm kidding. The point is that we watch the change in Israel. 78% of Israelis were born in Israel. And they look, and they don't know what diaspora is. My mother, my father, my mother, they came from the diaspora, like hundreds of thousands of Jews. And many of them after 1948. So they knew what the diaspora is. They experienced it by their own life. Israelis, they don't know what it means. We are the majority. Think about one single state on earth, and the Jews are the majority. By the way, it has a special responsibility for the minority. We talk about it. For you, also, dealing with thousands of Jews, now, I don't know how many I've met in my life. There is a huge difference between the grandfathers and the generation of the grandfathers and mother and the generation of the grandchildren. Those who are now attending American colleges or universities, and their perception of Israel is totally different. 30% of them believe Israel is an apartheid state. A huge percentage, over 30, they support the Palestinians and not the Israelis, and so on and so forth. So we have a challenge there. And why? Because they look at the world differently and they look at Israel differently. For them, having a Jewish state is not a miracle, it's just a fact. And they look at Israel as like any other single state on earth.
Yeah, but so,
if you feel that my answers are too long,
no,
I'm invited to cut them.
No problem. I'm used to it, so don't worry. So there is also a major change. Israel is now a wealthy country. It used to be that we have these drives in the diaspora to help Israel with money and trees from Keren Kayemet and all. Now Israel is more wealthy than most of the diaspora communities. And maybe the diaspora now needs more Israel than in the past. Don't you think so?
I absolutely agree with you. And that's why I lead the campaign for giving, not only for taking. I know you are very generous and you've been helping Israel for many years, and it will continue to give to Israel, also because giving is part of your culture. It's part of Jewish culture. But I'm the one who preaches back home to the Israelis that the relationship should be mutual, reciprocal. And we have to give, not less than to give. And if you are aware of it, we are involved in the Jewish education system here in Mexico, as well as in some other countries, in the Jewish communities in Latin America. We are involved in security projects here. We are combating anti-Semitism worldwide, including you too. And I will do more. And I'm using, literally, Israeli taxpayer money to help the diaspora. And I believe that should be on our agenda. Bennett served in that capacity, the Prime Minister, so he understands. And others too. I think that the Foreign Minister, Lieberman, the Finance Minister, other senior governments understand the importance of the diaspora, and also they understand that it costs money. It's not about shaking hands and hugging each other. These are the challenges. Let's see what Israel can do for us.
Many people, before we started, asked me to ask you about what's going on in Jerusalem today, because it's Yom Yerushalayim, and it seems that there is some kind of conflict. I don't know what's going to happen, but many people told me, you have to ask the minister about that. Well, I am asking you.
I was very much concerned, and during the night I woke up a few times. I miss my family, but that's not the only reason, and I was looking at my iPhone to figure out if something happened. There were some riots on the mountain, on the Teatro mountain in the morning, and then during the day, but not a major clash between Jews and Arabs. You know, today should be a day of celebration. We celebrate Israel's 55th Jerusalem Day. But there's always the danger of war between Jews and Arabs. There are 400,000 Arabs living in Jerusalem. 40% of the Jerusalem population is made of Arabs. By the way, they are not Israeli citizens. That's another matter. And the tension is very high. Not only that, there's huge incitement coming from many of us from Gaza and Hezbollah in the north. They're all watching the scene, what's going on. So it is relatively, it is quiet, nothing major happened. I hope by now it's all over, but we'll see how it develops maybe overnight. There were thousands and thousands of police officers, all kinds of, in Jerusalem today to make sure that great parade, the flags parade, will be able to march into the old city within the Muslim quarter. That can be regarded as a kind of provocation, but have no doubt, Jerusalem is one, Jerusalem is united, Jerusalem is under Israeli sovereignty, and we are not going to divide Jerusalem, and never. So that should be clear. At the same time, we have to be tuned to the fact that there are Christians and Muslims and Jews living together. We have to give everyone the freedom of religious, and we have to understand that Jerusalem is also a world capital. It's not only about us.
Absolutely. Let me ask you, there is a war in Europe, and we are concerned even in Mexico that is so far away of what's happening in the Ukraine and the invasion of the Russian army. Of course, Israel has to play this very carefully because there are many aspects of what can happen in that war. But one of the issues, as you as the Minister of the Diaspora, is the Ukrainian community.
Jewish community.
The Jewish community. The Jewish community in Ukraine. Right?
Yeah, they were.
So why don't you tell us about that? What are you doing? Are you doing something?
We have been working very closely with the Jewish community in Ukraine. There were at least 200,000 Jews according to the law of return, which means that at least one member of father, mother, grandfather, grandmother of the family are Jewish. Jews according to the Halaja, only 43,000.
I mean, for Mexican standards?
For Mexican standards a lot, but it's a middle-sized city in Israel.
Yeah.
And it's also proportionally the same, by the way, in Russia, 150 Jews spread out all over Russia, and 600,000 eligible for Aliyah in Russia, which is a major story as well. And my ministry has been working very closely with the leaders of the Jewish community there, mainly the Chabad rabbis. You should know that Chabad is very powerful in former Soviet Union, including Ukraine, and they hold the communities together. They hold them together. The rabbis are the leaders of the communities, at least half of the community. Then there are other organizations, mainly the JDC, the Joint Distribution Committee, also involved deeply. So we made an assessment of what their needs were, and we decided to support them financially, something that has never been done by the government of Israel. Just sending money to the communities for food, medicine, shelters, and whatever they asked for. When the war broke out, everyone was jumping in, so we moved aside a little bit, but we continue to work and to listen to them. And now we are working on a major project the day after the war, because we don't know the number, but scores of thousands of Jews left Ukraine. By the way, you should know.
Yeah, they are doing Aliyah, some of them.
I will talk about that in a minute, but 12 million Ukrainians left their homes. 12 million out of 42 million. 6 million left the country. A huge number. Within that, also, without Aliyah. So I've been there, I was watching the synod. I didn't cross into Ukraine because I didn't want to cause any diplomatic crisis between us and Ukraine, but I met the foreign ministry embassy staff that are, they moved to Poland, and now I think they are back in Kiev when things get a little bit more normal. They are doing a great job with the diplomats, saving life, helping the Jewish community. Aliyah. So 10,000 Jews arrived in Israel from Ukraine. But remember, those are half families. Half families, no men. The men were left behind.
Forbidden. They are forbidden to
They are forbidden to leave the country. So not all the time, but most of the time they are communicating with their second half of the family. But 10,000 of them applied for Aliyah, they live in Israel. Huge needs, I know, and I saw that other organizations are raising money for them, and thank you very much again. 30,000 non-Jews arrived in Israel as well. Yes, I was fighting my own personal work led them in. It wasn't simple. There are many issues. I don't want to bother you, but they live in Israel currently. And I guess that when the war is over, some of them are leaving the country anyhow. You should know that the European countries are very generous with the refugees from Germany, Sweden, Britain, even the United States, of course, it's not Europe. Every single state is letting them to come and stay and work for at least 3 years. And also they are much closer than in Israel. In Israel, they want to go back, they have to fly out. But they are staying, most of them in Europe, waiting for the war. Many of them already returned already. Even under the current situation, they prefer to stay with their families. It's a big tragedy. It's a big tragedy that we haven't witnessed since the Second World War.
Yeah, we have to be very aware of that, even in all the countries and all the Jewish communities. We have to really help them, because now I don't know how this war is going to end. Of course, maybe Mr. Bell, the Prime Minister, is going to have a more accurate answer.
The state of Israel has been helping them, but not with military staff. We send a field hospital for a few weeks. We send a lot of humanitarian aid. Hundreds, maybe thousands of Israelis, but not all the Israelis came to help them along the borders with Romania and Moldova and Hungary, all Hungary and every neighboring state. Israelis are very excited about it. It's interesting. More than the government. More than the government was quiet. But from political, now the public, listen. Every Jew is responsible, in my view, to the life of people that are fleeing a war zone and are refugees. We, the people we were refugees all our life. We are our sons, grandsons, great-grandsons of refugees. So we have special responsibility for refugees. That's how I see it. And that's why I was pushing very hard for getting more and more Ukrainians in Israel. They are not going to stay in Israel. They are not going to change the balance between Jews and non-Jews in the country. We are safe because they stay in Israel as long as the war is going on, and maybe even before they will leave the country. But I'd like that the state of the Jewish people will open its gates for people that are looking for a bed to sleep and to take a shower. And that's how I believe.
Absolutely.
We'll see.
We have that in our
I want this more. I want. There are more and more of them still coming in, but they don't get too much from the government. They are not recognized as refugees. Israel hasn't given them the status of refugees. Still, they prefer to come to
Because of the relationship of Israel with Russia?
No, because they have relatives in Israel and somehow not recognized as Jews, but still they want to come and stay with their families. It's such a heavy burden on the hosting families. And now we try to convince the government, I'm in the government, we are trying to convince my colleagues to let them work or to do something for themselves. We'll see how it works. The reality actually dictates the situation more than someone planned for it.
Let me change the subject. I would like to ask you about what is your opinion about global anti-Semitism? I mean, do we have more to be concerned? Do we have to be less concerned? How the anti-Semitism has changed during these years? What's your opinion about that?
You have to be concerned about anti-Semitism. We have noticed in the past few years, but especially in the past year, a huge spike in anti-Semitism, both in the public sphere, in the streets of Brooklyn, or in the streets of London, or in the streets of any other European state. I don't know.
So in the West?
In the West, yeah. I don't know enough about the East, that's all.
Yeah.
I don't know what's going on with in Russia.
Yeah.
If two yeshiva brothers now are being attacked in Sibir, I will never know about it. It will never be reported. Freedom of information exists only on this side, not on that side. But we know that Jews are extremely exposed to violence in the streets in numbers that we haven't witnessed. And secondly, something that bothers me even more is the social media and anti-Semitism. They became good friends. The social media, in a way, encourages anti-Semitic content because it creates a lot of traffic, and they love traffic because traffic gives them money and encourages more advertisement, and more money is coming as a result of it. And I hate to speak about it, but the fact is that they don't do enough to eliminate the anti-Semitic content, even if they know about it. In my ministry, we developed a certain system. You know, we're the high-tech nation, so we have some ways to figure out how to... Yeah, we know where they're tracking. We are tracking our real time. I can show you the spy. This is going on. Yeah, like the one after the CNN reporter was killed, and we don't know yet by whom. I hope it was not us, but if it was us, it was us. That's it. But again, immediately there was a spy. So it responds very quickly to current affairs, and we can figure out if something happens, what will happen the next day. So we know for sure that if the war breaks out tonight in the Middle East between us and Hamas and us and the Palestinians, you'll see it in the moment. Yeah.
So that's interesting, and I know that you just have a meeting in Cancun with the Latin American Jewish communities. How do you see the Latin American diaspora? What's your take on
I should honestly tell you that where's my teacher, Silvio? Where's Silvio? Silvio left the room.
already left, so.
He's done. He lost his position. Silvio has been in touch with me for a long time. He teaches me a lot about him. I was not very much familiar with the Jewish world here. I'm much more involved and familiar with the North American Jewry, where I spent like a number of years and lived there. And also Europe. But now I've got some my own impressions, and I'm much more convinced that we have to get more involved. Listen, the challenge is huge. And I don't know how to do it, honestly. I figure out that maybe if we do it through, and we mentioned it last night, through the digital world, we can communicate with more Jews around the world than we do right now. Because every school has 1,000 kids, 500 kids, 400 kids, I don't know, small numbers. But if we can hit the entire community, people get learned, because people here know how to use their iPhone or iPad, tablet and so on, computer, and through that communication we can reach out immediately and instantly. Silvio was rehired right now by the Jewish organization.
You're fired.
Silvio fired and hired in 30 seconds. But that's very typical to Israelis. They hire, fire, and they don't remember why he was hired and why he was fired. But that's a way back. So I said, Silvio, that you were my tutor about Latin America, and we decided to hold a meeting when I come back. Before I forget everything I saw, because I tell you, a month from now I will know where I went. That's the way it is in Israel. But before that, we have to sit down and discuss what can be done with Silvio and other, he works for the World Zionist Organization, other organizations involved. What can we do to improve the relationship and to invest our money in the right where we see it will be most effective.
What do you think is the biggest challenge for